Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I thought I would circle back and make another marathon video, and so today we're going to be taking a deeper dive into the Four Empire. The Four serve as an antagonizing force throughout the games, and make up the bulk of the enemies we fight throughout the Marathon trilogy developed by Bungie, and are the Marathon counterpart to Halo's Covenant. But before I continue, I'd like to thank all of our most recent subscribers, and invite you to consider subscribing if you haven't yet. The word four is pronounced identically to the number 4, the word for, and the prefix for, such as foreknew, forthright, or forerunner. The Four are galaxy-spanning empire slavers who predominantly target isolated, technologically inferior worlds, looking for populations that can be swiftly conquered and integrated into their empire. The Four use their slaves for manual labor at home and as soldiers abroad, and apparently even sell slaves to other advanced races in the galaxy. The Four are also known to have plundered many worlds for the Jijaro tech, which they base most of their own technology on, including their FTL-capable ships, the superweapon known as the Tri-Exeme, and their extensive cybernetic technology, which they use to create the cybernetic human slaves we encounter starting in the second game. An important question one might ask is, do the Four have leaders? And if so, who are they? While details are sparse, in the second game we learn that the Four have an elaborate bureaucracy. In the Manual of Marathon Infinity, Tafir, the oldest admiral of the Four, records a message addressed to the Four High Council. But interestingly, the Four Council may not be the highest rung on the Four hierarchy. The following is a quote from Marathon Infinity. Very impressive. "The primary function of intelligence is the subordination of our instinctive desires, the mark of a strong species, which is why your kind will serve well the needs of the hindmost. The hindmost is of an intelligence so vast it encompasses the span of the Four, and to those privileged to serve her appears insane. That is the final function of the commanding rank, the thought that we keep forever in our minds, that we deny our selfish willful needs, so that the Empire will survive." A similar text can be found at the end of one of the failed timelines in Marathon Infinity. "Great Mother, crouch behind the throne, I make this wrong right." Both texts seem to be alluding to a female matriarch, the uppercase her, and the description of her having a vast intelligence and appearing insane clearly tells us that we're talking about a specific individual. Both allude to the entity having a maternal role, as a quote-unquote creche is best translated to be a nest or nursery, and the title Mother directly suggests that it is a maternal figure of some kind. Perhaps a literal mother, a queen, similar to that of an insectoid species like ants or bees. An alternative theory that we ought to be skeptical of is that the female in question is a Jijaro AI that goes unnamed. Interestingly, the Four themselves may have been genetically modified and cybernetically enhanced on some level. The clearest evidence of this fact can be found in Marathon Infinity. In one terminal we are shown an interesting subdermal image of a Four skull. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and in this case at least, this is absolutely an understatement. Let's start with the obvious. In the back of the skull we can see an amorphous cluster of tissue. Some terminals of Marathon Infinity might offer some insight to this observation. These speak of glanded and unglanded units. If we look closely, the tissue in the image closely resembles that of an adrenal gland in a human specimen. The text describing the unglanded units is interesting because it seems to be referring to the cyborg himself. If we look closely, it appears that the back of the skull is plugging into some sort of machine interface. It should go without saying that this isn't a natural adaptation, at least in the traditional sense. The way I see it, there are two explanations here. The first is that the technology in the ship is interfacing with an underlying biological structure that evolved through natural evolution. The second explanation is that the gland itself was added at some point, and I believe the description of the cyborg player character as an unglanded unit lends credence to the second hypothesis. So it seems as if the Four have been modified and bonded to a synthetic gland of some sort, one that interfaces with external technology, probably built into their ships and dropships. This external tech might communicate electrical signals to the brain and gland to the Four, similar to how the brain itself might communicate with many of your body's glands, and then perhaps the Four glands release biochemical signals, sort of like a hormone, perhaps a synthetic hormone. What I would say is if it looks like an adrenal gland and it's called the gland, it's not too much of a stretch to think it might behave like one. The second thing worth noting in this image is on the opposite side of the skull. If we look closely at the face of the eye region, we can see sections of the subdermal image that look distinctly inorganic. It looks like a metal plate, similar to gold in appearance, and it seems as if it is grafted to the tissue in the front of the skull of the 4. It's possible that this is some kind of cybernetic implant. Perhaps the 4 didn't naturally evolve with 3 eyes, but were cybernetically and genetically modified to feature them some point in their past. But unlike the Sphit, there is no evidence that the 4's consciousness relies on cybernetic implants. Indeed, texts in Marathon 2 imply the opposite. But I believe if we read these terminals carefully, they don't necessarily rule out cybernetic implants that don't directly interface and enable consciousness. Given that the 4 appear to have both cybernetic and biological augmentations, it's possible that the 4, like the Sphit, are former servants of the Jaro that were left behind when the Jaro left. The 4 fighters are run-of-the-mill frontline soldiers. They carry a shock staff which is capable of firing bursts of energy at targets. Troopers are 4 soldiers, armored for vacuum conditions, who carry an assault rifle capable of firing explosives, similar to the AR-75 used by the player. So far, we have exclusively focused on the mainline 4 soldiers, but the 4 Empire has a host of other forces in their army. There are the machine servants, the drones, and the massive juggernaut. There are the 4 upper echelon, including their commanders. If we look closely at this image of the commander Tafir, we can see that he is holding a helmet on his side with a color scheme that closely resembles the 4 enforcers, which might imply that the 4 enforcers are just 4 wearing a bizarre suit or a ceremonial outfit of some kind. The alternative hypothesis is that the 4, similar to insects, have a profound amount of phenotypic plasticity. Enforcers are an intelligent 4 infantry. They carry a purple rifle, which just so happens to be the only alien weapon usable to the player in the trilogy. Enforcers prioritize shooting other 4 until provoked or all their underlings in the vicinity are killed. The Looker are small insect-like enemies who leap towards targets and explode upon impact. They only appear in the first game. There are also the Wasps, which feature a single red eye and tend to herd together into larger groups. The Drynel, or otherwise known as the Hulk, is a large, massive creature that we only see in the first Marathon game. Unfortunately, we know next to nothing about the Drynel. Then, there are the 4 Hunters, and this is where things get interesting. The 4 Hunters are taller than 4 fighters, heavily armored, and have an energy cannon on their shoulder. Many initially assumed that the 4 Hunters were merely regular 4 wearing a unique suit, but I believe a few pieces of visual information cast some doubt on this opinion. For example, beginning with Marathon 2, when the 4 are killed, they drop goo at their bodies. One hypothesis is that this is some sort of mechanical fluid which is pumped throughout the 4 Hunter. Additionally, in Marathon 1 we can find packs of static hunters that stand immobile. These hunters feature several long beige features not usually featured on the hunters. This led some in the Marathon community to speculate the hunters were machine drones like the drones and juggernauts, and that these strange features were mechanical tubing meant to pump mechanical fluid throughout the hunter. But I think there's a different hypothesis, one which I prefer. Given that the 4 Hunters later inspired the Halo Hunters, perhaps we can look to Halo for an answer to this question. In Halo, the Hunters in that game are a species called the Lekgolo. The Lekgolo are worm colonies that have a form of a Gestalt consciousness. They come in a variety of different subspecies and can be morphed into a variety of different forms. For example, there are traditional hunters, the Scarabs in Halo 3 are piloted by Lekgolo, and there are a variety of different hunter classes in the Banished in Halo Wars 2, including the Goliaths and the Hunter Leader. Now, if we look very closely, I argue that these long beige features look remarkably similar to the Lekgolo worms from Halo. Here we have a scene from the Halo 2 Anniversary terminals featuring the Lekgolo worms entirely exposed. And here we have the image from Marathon 1. I would argue that there's some very clear similarities here. When the 4 were at war with a hostile species that was resisting enslavement, a specific ministry within the 4 bureaucracy was tasked with creating imposter machines designed to imitate the offending species. Each machine was assigned a different permutation of facial features and body shape, allowing them to appear largely indistinguishable from genuine members of the species. These machines functioned as walking bombs that could explode once in proximity, and their disguise allowed them to accomplish that fairly easily. The Sphinx compilers were former servants to the Jaro, who were enslaved by the Four Empire, and performed a variety of critical tasks that held the Four Empire together. I have an entire video dedicated to the Sphinx released last year that goes into their history in depth. You can click on the button on the top right corner of the screen to watch it later. The Four Empire, stretching across many solar systems, was founded on the backs of the strength of their navy. The power and capability of the Four Navy was virtually uncontested, having virtually never suffered a genuine defeat. After all, if they came close to certain defeat, the superweapon the Triaxeme was simply used as a weapon of last resort that would destroy the sun of their enemies. One of the terminals in Marathon Durandal lists 4 types of ships in Battle Group 7: corvettes, destroyers, battleships, and an assault carrier. But as far as I can tell, we're only ever shown 2 classes of 4 ships. The final thing to look at are the internal design of their ships. The design of the 4 ships varied widely between the 3 Marathon games. In Marathon, some sections were dark and dungeon-like, while other sections looked distinctly organic. For example, this scene from Marathon 1 looks distinctly like a honeycomb of a bee or a wasp, and is probably associated with the 4 wasps. The 4 ship in Marathon Durandal, on the other hand, often looked somewhere between an abstract painting and an obstacle course from the 70s made for small children. The combination of green and purple is interesting. The 4 ship in Infinity is once again dark and decrepit, but once again none of the organic sections from the first game are present. Anyway, that pretty much brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you chose to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, or share the video with a friend who you think might enjoy it, because any of that at all would be greatly appreciated, and it would really help the channel out. Anyway, thanks again, and have a great night, and stay safe with all the craziness out there. 4 4